Father's Day, I'm excited. Father's Day is kind of up and down, right? I know there's different mixed emotions. For some people, Father's Day is awesome, and for some, Father's Day, not so much. And so we'll be sensitive to that. But we are going to be wrapping up the book of Ruth today. We're going to be finishing out our second book. But for those of you who've been here, which is most of you for a while, you know that I am not wearing all black today. I'm wearing a fancy t-shirt. This was my Father's Day gift from Samantha, so I thought I would wear it today. It's Dude Perfect. If you guys don't know who Dude Perfect is, they basically make their living on YouTube, doing trick shots and stupid stuff and just being funny. So I thought it would be appropriate for today. If you know me very well, and probably just through this process, you know that I like to have fun, that I am rarely serious, and I can appreciate a good joke. So I thought, in honor of Father's Day, that we would start out with some dad jokes. I know. All right. What did the police officer say to his belly button? You're under a vest. See, this is how I knew they were dad jokes, because when I told Alicia, I was the only one laughing. What kind of drink can be bitter and sweet? Reality. What does a penguin build his house with? It glues it together. My wife asked me to go to the store and pick up a 6-pack of Sprite. On the way home, I realized that I had picked 7. When does a joke become a dad joke? When it becomes apparent. That's the last one, I promise. Happy Father's Day. Okay, today we wrap up the book of Ruth. This book that bears her name, but she's not the hero of the story. The man we learned about last week, Boaz, is the hero of the story. Throughout my studies, I've read a lot of commentaries, read lots of opinions on the book of Ruth, and most of them center on relationships. They center on how to find a mate, how to find your Boaz, or how to find your Proverbs 31 woman. And there's a trend in the church today to look at the Bible, to read through the Bible, and look at it as a self-help book, right? And if we're reading through the scriptures and we're looking for ourselves in the text, then we're reading it wrong. We're off the mark. And we need to be looking for Jesus, because we're not the hero of the story. And through these 4 chapters, what we've seen is we've seen 2 women, very broken, bitter, that are walking together. Naomi the Jew and Ruth the Gentile, the Jew and the Gentile, broken, walking together. They are very much lost. They are very much hopeless unless somebody steps in. The only way that they can attain salvation, if I can put it that way, is if a Redeemer comes in. Boaz is the hero of the story in what has a very all's well that ends well feeling to it. Right? It ends on a high note. But it's been messy, and it culminates today on Father's Day with Boaz becoming a dad. I didn't plan it that way, but that's pretty cool that it worked out that day. Boaz becomes a dad here at the end of the book. And while it has a happy ending, we have to remember the dark night, the dark time, the trial that Naomi and Ruth walked through to get to this point. Lots of brokenness, lots of bitterness, but we see God shining through the cracks. In the mess, in the mud, God is coming through. We see his fingerprints all throughout it. There is also a sense of not yetness in the story. Yes, it ends on a happy note, and they have a child, but they're also looking forward to the day when everything is going to be made right. And there is also a sense of not yetness in our story, too. Because whatever blessings, whatever things come our way, whether it be physical or financial or relational, they're all temporary. Right? They're not complete, because we're still here on this side of heaven. That's why we're never satisfied with things that we get in this world. We're all designed with a God-shaped hole right in the middle of us. And it was put there by our Father. We have a Father hunger. And a lot of people in the world, they don't know that's what they're hungering for, but that's what's inside of them, is a hunger for the Father, because they try to fill it with so many things. And we look at people that are rich and famous, and we think, man, how can you be messed up when you've got it all, worldly speaking? Quick recap of last week. We discussed how Boaz went to the gate of the city. He went there because that's where the elders of the city would go. They would sit there. They would be the judges and the counselors. If you had a business transaction or if you had a legal matter, you would go to the gate of the city and they would act as witnesses. And Boaz knew that that other kinsman was going to be walking by, that he would be able to catch him at the gate of the city. And so he goes up there, and sure enough, the unnamed kinsman walks by, and Boaz grabs him. He says, "Hey, buddy, come take a seat." And then he grabs 10 elders from the city, and he has them sit down. He's like, "Listen, I want everybody to witness what's happening now. We're going to do this the right way. I don't want there to be any mistaking." And these 10 elders, we talked about how they represent the 10 commandments, the law. And the law just sits there and looks at us. It just judges us. Does it do anything to work on our behalf? And so he puts the question to the Redeemer. He says, "Listen, here's the situation. Naomi's back. Will you, because you're closer than I am, will you redeem her? Will you redeem the land?" And the kinsman says, "Absolutely. I'll do it." And so Boaz hits him with the weight of the issue, which is, in the day that you acquire Naomi and the land, you also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, and you are to raise up a child, an heir for the dead husband. He says, "Ooh, I can't do that. That's going to mar my inheritance." And so he backs out of it. He wanted the possession, but he didn't want the person. He wanted the thing, but he didn't want an extra relationship. He didn't want to do his duty. In Matthew 13, I got it, your Bible. One that I could read. Matthew 13:44. Jesus is telling us this awesome parable. It's the parable of the hidden treasure. And he says this. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. And then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has, and he buys that field." Now, we've talked about this before, but the field in the Bible is a symbol of the world, right? It's a symbol of the world. And the treasure that's in the field is you and me. That's the treasure in the field. We're the ones that are earthy. We're the ones buried in the dirt, if you will. Jesus is the one who paid it all. He's the one who emptied himself to come be a redeemer, to be a salvation for us. It says that for the joy, he went and sold everything. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone sell everything they have and be real joyful about it. Usually, if you're selling everything you own, you're not here anymore. Estate sale, right? It says that he sold everything he had to come and buy the field. He bought the field because of what was in the field. The treasure, you and me. His blood bought our relationship. But before Jesus came here physically, there was another kinsman that was closer to us, and that was the law. The law had a claim on our lives because of sin. It had a claim because of sin. But the law couldn't save us. If it could, it would. That would have been sufficient just to lay down the law. But it couldn't do it. This was this man's legal responsibility, but he wouldn't do it. Romans 10 tells us that Christ is the end of the law of righteousness for all who believe. So when Christ came, that's the end of the law. Trying to be righteous through the law. It's done because of Jesus. And then I used the opportunity at that point to talk about how if we have drawn up lines, if we have put up walls, anything in our life that are going to keep us, that are going to limit us from being completely obedient to what God's asking us to do, we have to get rid of those. We have to erase them. We have to wipe them out. Because if we are saying anything that is, "God, I will do this, but don't ask me to do this," that's a problem. "God, I will come to church, but don't ask me to serve in the kids' ministry." We don't really have one. But when we're changing poopy diapers in the kids' ministry back in the baby's room, there's an opportunity for you there. "God, I'll go to church, but don't ask me to go talk to my neighbors or to be kind to my boss or to do whatever." And if we've drawn up things in our lives, we need to get rid of them, and we're going to be blessed if we do. Our God, our Father, of the covenant, of the new covenant, of his blood, gave us instructions for life. Not to constrict us, not to hem us in, but to give us life, right? To give us an abundant life. And there may be times where we think, does God really love me? Can he really love me? with all of the things that I've done, with as jacked up as I am, can his grace go that far? And all we have to do is look at his son who died for us. He sent his son for us. Somebody explained it this way. I thought it was a really good analogy. It's not perfect. But imagine if when you go to heaven, God says, I want to show you my creation. I want to show you everything that I've made. And he takes you to a planet, and he says, I want you to look at this planet. And you look at it, and you say, oh, there's a lot of puppies. I see a lot of puppies. It's like a puppy planet. This is great. He says, well, look closer. And when you look closer, they're actually dogs. They're not puppies, they're dogs. And they are actually fighting. They're tearing one another up. And if you've ever seen two dogs fight, it's not pretty. And you say, well, what can we do about this? God says, I need somebody to go down there. They can't comprehend me. I'm too big. I can't speak to them. They won't listen. I need somebody to go down there, become one of them, and talk to them so that they understand my love and how to live. You say, okay, I'll go do it. No, here's the catch. You actually have to become a dog. You have to go there, spread the word, tell them the message, and by the way, they're not going to listen. And in fact, they're going to kill you. But it's okay because I'm going to raise you up. I'm going to bring you back to life. I'm going to bring you here. But you're going to be a dog forever, for eternity. That'd be a difficult assignment. I don't know if that's one I would sign up for. That's essentially what Jesus did. He became a man, one of us, to tell us what his Father was doing, what he was offering us. And when we get to heaven, we're going to see him as a man, broken, scarred. In Revelation it says, I saw the Lamb as if it were slain. It looked like it was slain. When we get there, I think he's still going to have the scars. He's still going to have the marks that he took for us. It's going to be an amazing day. The kinsman took off the sandal in a custom that's really weird for us, and he handed him his sandal. He says, listen, I'm walking away from this transaction. I'm walking away. I'm giving up my right. You redeem it. I can't do it. The elders and the people say, right on. They say, amen. Okay, we like this. Boaz is going to redeem Ruth. And then they pronounce this blessing over her. They say, may the Lord make this woman like Rachel and Leah, who bore the 12 tribes of Israel. May God make you fruitful. May you have a lasting heritage. May you have an incredible legacy. That's a pretty cool prayer. Now, that's what I want. I want people at the end of my life to look back and say, okay, yeah, Nathan was a good dude, but have you seen his kids? Like, have you seen his grandkids? They are rocking it for the Lord. That's the kind of heritage I want for my kids, my grandkids, and if Jesus hasn't come back yet, for future generations. When Alicia and I were married, the pastor that married us, Pastor Hal Linhart, he was a great man of God, he prayed over us at our wedding that our quiver would be full of arrows, which is a weird thing to pray over somebody. But essentially, what he was talking about, I'm a bow hunter, so I guess it worked out. No. Psalm 127, this is what it comes from. Psalm 127. And talking about children. 127, 3 through 5. It says, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of a womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks to his enemies at the gate. His prayer was answered. We got 6 arrows. 6 arrows. But then they pronounce this other blessing on him, which is really strange. They say, may your house be like the house of Perez, which is really strange. We talked about how strange that was because Perez was an illegitimate child. He was born illegitimate. But what they were saying is, may God's purpose, may his plans prevail, even when his covenant people fall short. Even when they lose faith, he is faithful. And that's what they meant. Perez meant to burst forth, to break through. God's plans break through despite our failings. No amount of scheming or planning or deceitfulness can derail what his plan is. This is what I think is amazing. God chose some big-time sinners to be in Jesus' family tree. I mean, his earthly line is filled with shame. But Jesus wasn't scared of that. because he came to save sinners and erase our shame. No matter what the sin, no matter what the shame, no matter what's going on, that's the reason why he came. And we touched briefly on Pentecost, which is right around the time when this part of the story is happening. When Ruth and Naomi walked into Bethlehem, it was Passover. That time they were celebrating when the people of Israel were in Egypt and the death angel was passing over and it was killing the firstborn in all of Egypt. Unless you had lamb's blood painted on the doorposts and along the top and along the bottom, which is interesting to me. But if you had the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, it would pass over. And that's what they were celebrating. And then 50 days later, after they left Egypt, after Passover, Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments. 50 days later, which is why they call it Penta. Penta means 5. 50 days later. Pentecost was already in place when Ruth was on the scene, but her conversion to the Jewish people happens right here at Pentecost. So at Pentecost, they always read the book of Ruth. I think that's really cool. They always read it. Now, we celebrate Pentecost as the day when the Holy Spirit came down. It was the Feast of Pentecost, and all the disciples are in the upper room. Jesus said, go to Jerusalem, wait there until you're filled with the Holy Spirit and power. And they're waiting there, they're praying, they're worshiping, and the Holy Spirit does fall on Pentecost. And they're speaking in tongues, they're talking in different languages, and people are like, wow, those guys started early. They're drunk. And then Simon comes out, Peter comes out and preaches an awesome sermon. Says, we're not drunk, this is what's going on. Preaches an awesome sermon, thousands of people get saved. But the Jewish nation and the Christian church have the same birthday. Weird, huh? All right, let's read our portion for today. Ruth 4, 13 through 22. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went to her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed is the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. And they named him Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. And Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. All right. Boaz marries Ruth, and they have a son. No big surprise, right? Interesting, his name Obed means servant. There's actually 2 meanings. It seems like they're not the same, but one means servant, one means worshiper. But in Colossians 3:17 it says, and whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to the God of the Father through him. So it's interesting because as we serve, when we do it in the name of the Lord Jesus, it is as worship to him. So servant and worship, both kind of the same thing. I thought that was pretty cool. The women here pray that the fullness of God's purpose will go on beyond her lifetime. Then the woman said to Naomi, blessed is the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. Like I said, that's what I want. I want God's purpose for my life to flow through me into my kids, into my grandkids, and their families' lives as well. That's why this book ends in a genealogy. The women tell Naomi that Ruth is worth more to her than 7 sons, which is a crazy claim, because if you had sons in that day, especially multiple sons, you were considered very blessed, because the sons are the ones that could provide. They were the ones that could bring home the bacon, so to speak. And 7, we know that 7 is the number of perfection. It's the number of completion. And so Naomi's joy is complete, if you will, when a son is born to Ruth, and through whom the perfect one would come in Jesus Christ, the Messiah. She's married the Redeemer and produces a child whom Naomi basically adopts as her own because her sons are dead. And here's the point. God uses our calamity for his purposes. He uses our trials, our pain, for his purposes. If there was no trip to Moab, there would be no Ruth. And if there was no Ruth, there would be no David. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes when we're asking the question, God, why is this happening in my life? Like, why am I going through this pain? Why am I going through this trial? It doesn't feel like abundant life. It feels like death, quite honestly. But how we walk through those trials, how we walk through those seasons will have ramifications that go on into eternity, through generations, how we walk through those. Most of you know our story. When our son Levi passed, I was in a very low place. To the point where one day, I don't care. I don't care if I live or die. I really don't. Because if I'm alive, I'll be with my wife and kids. If I die, I'm with Jesus. And I get to see my son again. So I wasn't real concerned about generations. And I remember distinctly because I was on my motorcycle and I was going about 90 down 435, not really caring. And I remember the thought that popped into my head. God said, generations, your kids, your family, their families, you need to be here because the way that you walk this out has consequences and it's going to matter. Right? Amen. I remember that distinctly. Nothing could take the place of Naomi's husband and sons, but she does have this precious possession now that she's holding that's going to nourish her in her old age. They actually said a son has been born to Naomi in verse 16. Then Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. That's pretty interesting, that she kind of adopts little Obed to the point where they're like, I don't know if Ruth couldn't get him back to hold him or what. I don't know, because Naomi was holding on to him. Nobody else got to hold him. Quick peek at a prophetic aspect of this book. This is really cool. I think we need to understand this as we look at the book of Ruth and how it pertains. I think like between 25 and 30% of the Bible deals with prophecy. And I would challenge you to find any other book, any other religious book out there in the world that deals with prophecy and that has predicted things that have come true. I was listening the other day and just talking about the prophecies of Jesus and the things that came true. And I mean, things like just little things like being born in the tribe of Judah, in the town of Bethlehem, that he would be betrayed, that he would be crucified, that he would be sold for 30 pieces of silver, that his back would be striped. And all of those things, the chances. I read the chances of just 8 of those things coming true in one person. And there's like 100, over 100 by the way. Just 8 of them is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. That's a 10 with 17 zeros behind it. Just one man, just fulfilling 8. That's pretty incredible. But prophetic, okay, so Naomi, we don't see Naomi meet Boaz at all in the story. So presumably, she's brought back into relationship with Boaz at the wedding. Like, that's when she would have seen him again. So Naomi is brought back into relationship with Boaz at the wedding through Ruth. Who cares, right? Okay, this is the last weekend that I get to talk about Ruth. So I'm going to go through it again. Naomi represents the Jewish people, right? And the Jews are going to be brought back into relationship with Jesus when the church marries Jesus. We are called the bridegroom, or we're called the bride of Christ, and Jesus is the bride. And when he comes back and he takes us out of this world, what did I say?
He's the bride.
He's the bridegroom. We're the bride of Christ. Yes, sorry, I'm trying to get this right. When he comes back and he takes us out of this world, at the rapture, we will be essentially married with him. And we are taken away into heaven for a 7-year honeymoon that is called the marriage supper of the Lamb. And meanwhile, here on earth, the 7 years of the tribulation are happening. The time that is called Jacob's trouble. Jacob changed to Israel. His name was changed to Israel. And that'll be happening down here. In Romans 11:8, it says that they were given a spirit of stupor and eyes that would not see and ears that would not hear down to this day. They cannot see that Jesus is the Messiah. But when he comes back and they see him, they're going to be like, it was him. It was Jesus. He was the Messiah. He is the Messiah. And we're taken out of here, and they are reunited with him. And the gospel will be handed off to them, and new life will be breathed into the Jewish nation. That makes sense. And they're going to need it, because it's going to be brutal. But 144,000 witnesses, 12,000 from each tribe, 144,000 Jewish Billy Grahams raise up and start preaching the gospel, and it's going to be awesome. I'd say that it's going to be something to see, but I don't want to be here to see it. We'll be in heaven, but it's going to be incredible. Once they realize, and once they're brought back into relationship with Jesus. Gives me goosebumps. The book ends with a genealogy. David's genealogy started when there was no king in Israel. It was the time of the judges where there was no king in Israel, and now the book ends with King David. Sometimes we go through these genealogies and basically, let's be honest, sometimes they're boring. So-and-so begat so-and-so, down to the end. Right? Or to get through the genealogies. But God is telling a story. Everything is about Jesus. Everything points to Jesus. So he's telling a story here again. Remember Perez, the illegitimate son of Judah. That's where the genealogy starts. I'm going to put the names and their meanings up here. So go ahead. The first one is Perez, which means one who breaks through. Hezron, which means enclosure. Ram, which means one who is exalted. Aminadab, my kinsman is noble. Nahshon, one who foresees. Salmon means clothed. That's always good. Boaz, standing in strength. This is awesome. I saw this week. Boaz, his dad was Salmon. His mom was Rahab. Rahab from Jericho. The one that's mentioned in his genealogy. The one that Matthew puts in there. Rahab. That's incredible. Isn't that amazing? Okay. I geek out on that stuff. Okay. Obed means servant. Jesse means husband. David means blessed. God is telling a story. We can see his redemptive plan throughout history. This history, which spans about 680 years. Okay? If we were to put all these names together without making too much of a stretch, it could read like this. The one who broke through the enclosure, or grave, is exalted. He is my noble kinsman, the foreseer, clothed in the strength of the Lord. A servant is my husband, beloved. How cool is that? Isaiah 53 calls Jesus the suffering servant. We are the bride of Christ. I think that's pretty amazing. Okay, I'm getting really teachy. I promise I'm getting to Father's Day. Check this out. Early in our study of Ruth, we talked about how no descendant of a Moabite male could enter the assembly for 10 generations. Right? Deuteronomy 23:3. But in verse 2, right before that, it says that no male descendant of an illegitimate child can enter the assembly for 10 generations. So if you were born of a Moabite male or an illegitimate child, you couldn't go into the assembly for 10 generations. These are the generations of Perez, illegitimate. This is the reason why the genealogy starts with him. Hezron, Ram, Aminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David, and Solomon, who built the temple. Isn't that amazing? That's cool. I love it. Okay, Boaz, who is the hero, is part of this legacy. So now we pivot to the dads. He's a dad. What do we want our legacy? What do we want our heritage to look like? Maybe you feel like a Perez right now. Maybe you feel like you're an outsider, like you don't belong, like an illegitimate child. But all we have to do, Jesus said, if you have a mustard seed's worth of faith, he can do amazing things, miraculous things with it. That parable of the mustard seed, this is in my notes, but that mustard seed is the tiniest seed, but he said it grows into a tree that houses birds. Now, if you've seen a mustard seed plant, it ain't a tree. It's just a pilly little plant. So Jesus was saying, look, he can do something incredible, a miracle, with just a little bit of faith. And if we give it to him, he can do the rest. And your heritage can be one that is godly. Over the years, as I've been in church, I've kind of seen this play out. On Mother's Day, we praise the moms. We honor the moms. The moms are awesome. The world runs on moms. And then on Father's Day, we beat up the dads. We love on the moms and we beat up the dads. We say, dads, come on, get it together. Turn off Sports Center and lead your family. And that's generally the way it goes. So I'm not going to beat up on the dads today. I'm not going to beat them up, because what we need to do is beat back the devil. That's what we need to do as the guardians. We have to fight for our families. In the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah comes back to Jerusalem with a group from Babylon, and he's heard that the walls have fallen down, and he wants to come back and rebuild the walls. And so he brings these people, they start work on the walls, they're very diligent, and then they get reports that people in the area that don't want them rebuilding are going to come down and attack them. And so they get really freaked out. Nehemiah calms them down. He sets them in front of their house and he says, listen, build the part in front of your house. Build that part. And you're going to have to fight for your families. While you're building, strap a sword to your side. Be ready to fight while you're building. Not only that, when half of you are working, the other half need to stand guard. So there is protection in place. And then as we're working, we're to be fighting for our families, because the culture is waging war on men and families, and it's been doing it for decades. The media out there portrays men as incompetent, lazy buffoons, honestly. Unengaged, self-absorbed, uninterested idiots. I heard one person call it the wussification of America, is what's going on, the wussification of America. I don't want to call out, I want to call up. That's what we need for the men. We need strong dads, male figures in the home. Might be a granddad, might be an uncle, might be a brother. We need godly men leading. Alicia shared some articles that she heard in a podcast this week. Articles from these media outlets that I just mentioned. These are from the past decade, okay? The Atlantic published a story called, "Is the Father Necessary?" The New York Times published an article, "What are fathers for?" And then the Huffington Post published an article entitled, "Fathers Are Not Needed." That's what the culture is feeding us. And I could read you statistics all day long that say just the opposite, and how when things work the way God designed them, they actually work out. Isn't that amazing? When we show that type of hesed, that covenant promised love to the people that have been put in our lives for us to affect, to raise, to protect, it goes well. God placed Ruth in Boaz's life to show covenant love too. God has placed your wife, your kids, people in your path to show that covenant love too. The people that you have been entrusted with. And if we want our legacy to go beyond us, regardless of the personal expense, we need to have a mindset that looks to the future, not one that looks back at what the enemy has done, but one that looks forward with what Jesus can do with lives that are surrendered to Him. And if we want it to outlive us, we have to intentionally pursue relationship with Him and with the people that He's given us. You may have had an emotionally distant father, maybe you feel like one, but how we relate to our dads, good or bad, can affect the way that we relate to God, and whether or not we feel like we can be close to Him. And why is this a big deal? It's a big deal that you pursue relationship with your kids, because their capacity to talk to God and to relate to Him can be directly, related to how much they can feel talking to you, feeling close to you. It'll be affected. So that's important, because what's at stake is where our kids will spend eternity. That's what's at stake. Not just a relationship, not just good memories, but where they will spend eternity. Mark 10:13, we have this famous little passage that tells us that parents, it says in verse 13, and they were bringing children to Him that He might touch them, and the disciples rebuked Him. The parents were bringing their kids to Jesus. The word is they, and it's a neutral term, which means that both dads and moms were bringing their kids to Jesus for Him to touch them. The disciples were like, "Get him out of here." Jesus got upset with them. He's like, "Don't do it. Let him come, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And it might be the most important thing that you hear all day is the parents were bringing their kids to Jesus for Him to touch them. And dads, are we the ones that are bringing our kids to Jesus? Surrounding them with godly influences, praying for them, praying with them. If they don't see it at home, if they don't see it modeled, they're not going to do it themselves. I had a friend that I worked with, and we were talking one day about his son, and he was making some bad decisions, people that he was hanging out with, and at the end of the conversation he said, well, you can't choose your kids' friends. I said, you want to bet? I don't tell my kids, but I chose all their friends. There are lots of things that we could glean, pun intended, glean from Ruth. Lots of things we could glean by looking at different dads in the Bible who were imperfect, but who God did amazing things through. The Bible is very descriptive in all the ways that they fell short, all the ways that they messed up. But since we're wrapping up the book of Ruth, I thought we'd just take a look at Boaz and the type of man he was and the type of character that he had that would have been passed on to his children. First of all, Boaz is a man of strong character. He's a man that we would say is of integrity. In chapter 2, he is described as a worthy man, as a man of standing. That phrase, a man of standing, oftentimes is translated mighty man of valor. And we hear that when the man Gideon is in the winepress and he's threshing grain in the winepress because he is scared of the Midianites. He's hanging out in there, and an angel appears to him and says, behold, mighty man of valor. And Gideon's like, me? Like, yeah, you are a man of standing. You're gonna be. He was calling him up, not calling him out. And he proved his character in the decisions that he made in uncertain circumstances. When Ruth came to him at the threshing room floor in the middle of the night, all dressed up, perfume, he could have taken advantage of that situation, but he didn't. He wanted to do things the right way. When he sat the kinsmen down and the elders, I want to do things the right way. I want to do things with integrity. Hard times, trials, adversity in our life does build character. I had a friend, he said, that'll be character building when you go through tough things. But it also, more importantly, reveals our character. It reveals what's inside of us. And if you're not in a battle right now, if you're in a time of peace, you will be going into a battle soon. And so can I encourage you to dig in spiritually now, so when you get to the battle, you have something to draw on. And you're not trying to develop character during and after the fact when you've messed up and you're learning from your own mistakes. Learn from others' mistakes now before you get into the battle. And then that'll be developing your character, your integrity. You may have heard sportscasters say things like, when a guy has an opportunity to come through in the clutch, and the sportscaster says, boy, that guy really rose to the occasion. But if you could talk to that athlete, he would tell you about the days and the weeks and the months and the years that he spent preparing for that opportunity. So when he got it, he could come through and deliver. And that is the truth. What we do when nobody else is looking is going to develop our character, our integrity. Okay, secondly, Boaz was a servant. In chapter 2, when they're having lunch and he invites Ruth over, he passes her the food. He serves her, which is completely backwards. If we just look at Jesus, Jesus washed his disciples' stinky, dirty feet. He put himself in the lowest possible position. He says, if you want to be the greatest, if you want to be the leader, you got to be the servant of all. Imagine the person that you admire the most, the person that you think most highly of, walking in here with a bowl of water and a towel and starting to take off your shoes. I'd freak out. I'd be like Peter. I'd stand up and be like, no way you're washing my feet. He said, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part with me. Then Simon's like, give me a bath. You don't need a bath, dude. I'm not doing that. I'm just washing your feet. Servant leadership, it's what we're called to as dads, to lead our families by example. Our kids aren't going to serve. They're not going to be servants if they don't see us being servants. It ain't going to happen. Next, Boaz was generous. He was a generous man. We see this on several occasions. He was charitable. He let the poor come into his fields and glean. That was in the law, and he made it happen. He had his men drop out handfuls of grain right in Ruth's path to make sure that she got more. And then when she was there at the threshing room floor, he poured more grain into the garment and had her take that back. So he was providing physically, materially. But regardless of where we are on the economic scale, one thing that we all have the same amount of is time. We all have the same amount of time in a day, and what we do with it matters. The most generous thing we can give is our time. Our kids spell love T-I-M-E. That's how they spell love. If we can give them one-on-one time. I hear people say oftentimes, well, we just need some quality time. But the problem is you can't schedule quality time. Quality time comes out of quantity time. And we're getting ready to have some quantity time. We're leaving after this. We're going to go on a little trip. We're going to drive south until we hit a beach. But hopefully some quality time comes out of that. And we can schedule that. One of the most rewarding things for me, and I wish I did it more often, but is spending one-on-one time with my kids. They're different when you get them off by themselves. When they're all together, sometimes they're different. When you get them off by themselves, you form some interesting relationships. I wore this shirt today. Sam got me for Father's Day because of Dude Perfect. It's one of the things that we enjoy, so I thought it would be fun to wear it today. But finding those things, developing those fun habits and relationships with your kids, because you can't get time back. I found this story. Charles Francis Adams, son of President John Quincy Adams and grandson of President John Adams, kept a diary. That's a tough act to follow. Your dad and your granddad were presidents of the United States. He kept a diary, and one day he entered, "Went fishing with my son today, a day wasted." His son, Brooke Adams, also kept a diary, which is still in existence. And on that same day, Brooke Adams made this entry: "Went fishing with my father today, the most wonderful day of my life." The father thought he was wasting time while fishing with his son, but his son saw it as an investment of time. The only way to tell the difference between wasting and investing is to know one's ultimate purpose in life and to judge accordingly. I'm going to read that again. The only way to tell the difference between wasting and investing is to know one's ultimate purpose in life and to judge accordingly. What is our ultimate purpose as fathers? It's not just to raise kids that are going to be successful in the world's eyes. It is to produce godly disciples, followers of Jesus that are going to expand his kingdom, that are going to be pointed towards him. That's what the ultimate purpose of our life is. If they're successful in the world's eyes, fine, so be it. But first and foremost, I need to make sure that they're pointed in the right direction. Okay, next, Boaz was a blessing. When he went out into the field, he blessed his workers. He said, "May the Lord bless you. May the Lord be with you." And they said, "May the Lord bless you." He said that. And then when he was talking to Ruth, he said, "May the Lord give you a full reward under whose wings you've come to take refuge." And then later at the threshing room floor, he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord." He was constantly blessing. The words that he was saying brought life. Our words have power. And what we say about other people when they're not around is who they become in our minds and in the minds of those who hear it. What we say about them, our words have power. And what are we speaking over our children? What are we speaking prophetically over them? Proverbs 18:21 says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Sometimes we read that and we kind of gloss over that. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Life and death in the words that we speak. Solomon wrote those words. David's son. And Solomon wrote those 31 Proverbs for his son. The first 7 chapters start off, "My son, my son, my son." That's who he was writing it to. He was investing. Don't just call your kids out, call them up. We need to be careful with our words. Once they're said, they can only be forgiven, they can't be forgotten. And I have had to ask forgiveness from my kids multiple times for things that I have said that cannot be forgotten. Forgiveness is actually the greatest thing that our Father has offered us. Ernest Hemingway wrote this story. I thought it was true, so I had to check it out, but sometimes these are just good stories. Ernest Hemingway wrote this story of a Spanish father and a son who became estranged. And so the son ran away, and the dad was pursuing him, looked for months to no avail. And so in a last-ditch effort, he took out an ad in the Madrid newspaper. And the ad simply said, "Dear Paco, meet me in front of the newspaper office on Saturday at noon. All is forgiven. I love you. Your father." And on Saturday, 800 Pacos showed up looking for love and forgiveness from their father. Now, I would have been impressed if it was 50. I'm betting, now, I don't know when this was written in Ernest Hemingway, but now the population of Madrid is like 6.6 million, but in 1950 it was like 2 million. So out of 2 million. But I would venture to say if that ad ran in the Kansas City Star in 1950, it said, to my son Michael, that there might have been a bunch of sons named Michael show up looking for love and forgiveness from their fathers. The words that he spoke were a blessing and they brought life. Lastly, Boaz was a protector. Somewhere in chapter 2, between talking to Ruth and between talking to his unnamed servant, he had gone to his other servants and instructed them, don't touch her. Don't touch her, don't rebuke her. In fact, provide for her, draw water for her. He instructed them to protect her. This is an easy one for us as dads generally, to think about protecting our kids. I mean, physically, that's easy. I heard it once that, guys would take a bullet for their family, but will we live for our family? Like, we would die for our family, but will we live for our family? It's very instinctive to protect our children, but that's why what's happening in our culture today is so evil. Because what's happening is everything, all these layers of protection are being stripped away from our kids so that they can be desensitized, so that the family can be destabilized, and so that biblical Christianity can be buried. That's what's happening today. His attacks are getting way more sophisticated. It's not just protecting them from other people. We are fighting a battle for their minds. Satan doesn't just show up on our doorstep in red tights and a pitchfork. Say, yeah, I'm here to bother your kids. If he did, everyone would tell him to get out, but he's way more sophisticated than that. We have to guard their minds. We have to guard their spirit. In Romans 12:2, it says, do not be, I'm going to spit some scripture out to you really fast. In Romans 12:2, it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. In 2 Corinthians 10, we are to take every thought captive. In Matthew 22:37, he said this, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Paul tells us in Ephesians 6 to put on the helmet of salvation. We are to put on the hope and the knowledge of our salvation every single day. There's a scene in Saving Private Ryan, if you've seen it, on D-Day when they are on Omaha Beach. They're all piled up behind this embankment. And there's a guy, and he has a bullet ricochet off his helmet, and it creates a dent. And he takes his helmet off to look at the dent. And when he's looking at the dent, he gets done in because he took his helmet off. We need to keep the helmet of salvation on every single day. Because if the enemy can change their mind, he can change their heart. So we need to be guarding their minds. Godly character, servanthood, generosity, speaking words of blessing, protecting. We could go on, obviously, but you can go get the kids. But these are qualities that we should strive for as fathers and grandfathers, because it's not too late. It's not too late to make a difference. Our Lord is a restorer. He is a rebuilder of the wall. That's what this book is all about. Just Ruth, this entire book. God is working behind the scenes. His fingerprints are all over it. He's bringing beauty out of ashes. He's bringing life out of dead-end situations. I mean, this book of Ruth, this looked like 3 dead ends. It looked like a dead end for Boaz's life, for Naomi's life, for Ruth's life. And for you and me, our lives are a dead end without Jesus. If he hadn't come and been the Redeemer, our lives would be at a dead end. But we're brought back into relationship, and now we have access to him. If there ever was a man's man, it was General Douglas MacArthur. He is basically a legend in the minds of Americans, and especially American men. Basically a legend. I found this quote that's attributed to him, and I thought it appropriate here to end with on Father's Day. General Douglas MacArthur said this, by profession, I'm a soldier, and I take pride in that fact, but I'm prouder, infinitely prouder, to be a father. A soldier destroys in order to rebuild. A father only builds, never destroys. The one has potentialities of death, the other embodies creation of life. And while the hordes of death are mighty, the battalions of life are mighty still. It is my hope that my son, when I'm gone, will remember me not from the battle, but in the home, repeating with him our simple daily prayer, our Father who art in heaven. And may that be our heritage, dads, to our kids. they don't remember the battle, that they don't remember the gunk and the junk and the trials of life, but that they remember that we invested time, that we invested spiritually into them and to the people around us.